So, the worst has happened. Civilization has fallen. And from the ruins of civilization, man has picked himself up and he has rebuilt something of his society. But now we are beyond that point. We've reached a point where everybody who could remember before has died. Societies have stabilized. New religions have formed, or perhaps old ones have been reborn. And that is what I want to talk about today. Building a post-apocalyptic society. The society that comes after those chaotic first years of just barely surviving. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. If you would like my help in world building for you, you can hit my Ko-fi page where I do sell my world building services. If you want to help me make more of these videos, you can either buy my books, linked down below, or hit the join button on this channel for some really cool membership perks. Okay, enough of that. Let's crack on with the video. So, of course, the very first step in building a post-apocalyptic society is building the apocalypse and building the post-apocalypse society. Now, I have already made videos on both of those topics, which you can check out in the information cards. But for the purpose of today's video, the important point to remember is that what caused the catastrophe and how it impacted the previous civilization, and if there were any long-term effects of the catastrophe, will impact your post-apocalypse society, especially the long-term effects. The immediate effects of the catastrophe is the collapse of society, but long-term effects could linger. You could have mutated creatures running around. You could have places where radiation is particularly strong and people can't go. You could have permanent storms that have been born in climate change and that have created this vortex of energy that just never stands still. So those are things that are important to know for your post-apocalypse society, and which is why you do need to know what caused the apocalypse. Now, obviously, the first step post-apocalypse is rebuilding the basics of your society. Like, what resources do you have left? The survivors banding together, people trying to cope, people working with each other, leaders emerging, and new social structures emerging. And you can check out my thoughts on that in my post-apocalyptic video. But the point for this video is that those structures that emerge then will impact your post-apocalyptic society that arises from those structures. If you have a single strong leader emerging, it's quite likely that you will become a strongman type government. If a group of people have managed to retain control of resources and band together, you might end up with an oligarchic type government as your post-apocalyptic society. So do think about what happens in the immediate aftermath of the apocalypse that gives rise to your post society. Okay, so with those two out of the way, let's get to the actual post society and how you build this government. So the questions that you need to answer about your society is, what kind of government will this society have? What kind of laws and rules will exist in this society? What kind of societal structures will exist in this society? And what is the economy of your new society? So I want to explore those questions by talking about two post-apocalyptic societies, specifically Horizon Zero Dawn, the video game, and Mark Lawrence's world in Prince of Thornes, his post-apocalyptic world in Prince of Thornes. In Horizon Zero Dawn, you have a very decentralized government structure. You have multiple tribes like the Karja and the Nora, who all have different governmental structures and who might be allied, they might talk to each other, they might visit each other, they might even war with each other, but they don't have a centralized form of government. So this kind of government would arise from a society where you have small bands of people banding together separated from each other by the apocalypse and by the distances between their communities. And so those people develop in different ways, creating these pockets of civilization with badlands between them. And it's important that you have those badlands, because your tribal societies evolve like that separately because they are separated, because they can't reach each other. So think about that if you want a tribal society. Why are these people separated from each other? Why don't they link up into a single government? Now, in such a society where you have tribal societies like that, your laws and values will differ from tribe to tribe. And you can see that in Horizon Zero Dawn. The Nora value nature and looking after nature, and they live in harmony with nature and the robotic beasts and everything else. The Karja place much more emphasis on technology and advancement and innovation, so their laws and structures and norms are geared more towards that, are geared more towards fostering innovation. The social structures that emerge will also differ from tribe to tribe. And again, you can see that in Horizon Zero Dawn, with the Nora being a matriarchal structure and the Karja being a patriarchal structure. And I think that you also here in post-apocalyptic societies have the opportunity to switch from whatever the world was before. So let's say that previously you had a strong patriarchal world. You could, after a fall, switch to a matriarchal world as the people blamed the men who were in charge for leading them into the apocalypse. This could be a consequence of your apocalypse. And if you'd like to see my thoughts on when matriarchy in a fantasy world makes sense, you can check out the information card. And then in terms of the economy of Horizon Zero Dawn, within the tribes will be different from outside the tribes. So within the tribes, you might have a gift-giving economy, like I discussed when I spoke about the San people of Southern Africa that had a culture where you would give a gift and without the clear expectation of a return. But the societal structure was such that if anybody else was in need and you had plenty, you would give them a gift. And this is a result of a high trust society. So if your tribe is a high trust tribe, you could have such a gift-giving culture. But if it's a more low trust tribe, especially one that lives in larger settlements like cities and so on, it is much more likely to have a traditional resource-driven economy. And that economy, the resources of that economy, will very clearly be tied to either your previous world, your old world, or the resources that come out of your apocalypse or so on. That apocalypse needs to echo through your world. It needs to be something that touches your post-apocalyptic world at every point. Because otherwise, why are you building a post-apocalyptic world and not just a normal world? So you want the echoes of that apocalypse to be in your economy and to be in your resources. Okay, so we spoke about Horizon Zero Dawn, but what about Prince of Thornes? So the government of Prince of Thornes is a much more feudal society government with powerful warlords and kings controlling regions who then owe their fealty to the lord above them, and so on and so forth. It is interesting that this is the same model that developed in Europe after the fall of Rome. So you could make a very strong argument that such a feudal model could very easily arise from any given apocalypse, given that we have literally seen it happen and play out in our own world, where the centralized power of Rome fell and was replaced by these small warring states of powerful men leading warrior bands against each other and building this feudal society. One of the most interesting things about the Prince of Thornes world that Mark Lawrence built is that the church is a very, very powerful structure within the society, and it dictates much of the laws, much of the values of the society. Now, the church is the Church of the Broken Christ, and they guard the technology and the magic from the time before. So they exercise a great deal of control over the resources from the time before and the new resources that have been born since, which is magic. And that control over those two resources gives the church enormous power. But how did the church get here? Well, they say that the apocalypse was the result of a race of people called the builders, who created everything, including humanity, and ultimately became displeased with humanity and caused the apocalypse. And the church says that they, the church, are the only intermediaries between the people and the builders. And they are the reason why there has not been another apocalypse. And that is why the people need to trust them and listen to them and obey them. Because you haven't seen another apocalypse happen yet, have you? So the church uses that combination of fear tactics and their control over resources like technology and magic in order to cement their place in the post-apocalyptic society. And I can definitely see this in a post-apocalyptic society. That kind of strong, centralized religion would be something that could very easily arise, especially if it keeps control of something from the past. And if you enjoyed that discussion of the kind of society that would arise out of post-apocalypse, hit the thumbs up button. And let's talk about knowledge and technology in a post-apocalyptic society. So first, as I said, you do want your apocalypse to be echoing still, to be there in the fabric of your world. And as such, part of your world should be the recovery of that lost knowledge. People should stumble into that lost knowledge occasionally and find things out. It should become a part of their world. And you can see this in Horizon Zero Dawn, where the Nora struggle to understand the ancient ruins and technology left behind by the old ones. And Aloy, the protagonist, plays a key role in understanding this technology. Indeed, when you're playing Aloy, you interact with this technology. It's part of your whole exploration of those ruins, and it's part of everything that you do. Like, you get this device with which you can take control of the robotic animals, and you can get yourself a mount by sticking this device into them. And, so there's all kinds of ways in which you can interact with this ancient knowledge that was left behind by the people who existed before the apocalypse. And we see it in Prince of Thornes as well, where Jorg, the protagonist, gathers the weapons and the knowledge, especially the engineering knowledge, of the old ones that they left behind. Heck, he steals a whole fortress at one point. So you need to think about what was left behind after the apocalypse, and how would people interact with that old technology, and what would they learn? It is important to note that that sort of exploration of old technology should not be risk-free. And again, in both Horizon Zero Dawn and with Prince of Darkness and with Prince of Thorns, there are definite prices to getting it wrong. The Banuk tribe's experimentation leads to machine corruption, and with Prince of Thorns, the builders' innovations sometimes fail to work, or otherwise lead to disastrous consequences as people interact with them in a way that this machinery was not meant for. Because remember, these people are interacting with old technology that they have no manual for. They can very often just be touching things in a weird way. It is also important to remember that this kind of exploration of technology can lead to cargo cults. So a cargo cult is where you interact with something and it spits out a result that leads you to think that your interaction with it caused the good result to happen to you. So you could have people interact with technology and create a cargo cult around this. Like, if you walk in on this day to this place and press this stone, then you get a meal, because somebody has found an old vending machine or whatever. But then the vending machine runs out of food. But now the people have no idea what they've been doing. So they just know that they no longer get food. Now it could become like, oh, you have angered the gods. And, meantime, it's just a case of the vending machines run out of chocolate bars or whatever the case may be. So it's also worth thinking about whether in this exploration of the old technology, has anybody fallen into a cargo cult trap? But of course, it's not just old technology that's important. This world should still build new technology, whether they build it on the old technology or whether they build it fresh or however it comes about, it is important that there is still technological progress. And this technology can be built with reverse engineering, or it can be built with collaboration between people, or it can be built using whatever you understand from here, from the old knowledge, and building on that increasingly. But it can also be built using a new resource that has come about, specifically magic. And for the example of magic, I want to turn to Shadowrun. So in Shadowrun, magic has returned to our world. So all of a sudden there are dragons, there are fairies, there are spirits, there are people who can cast magic and everything else. But at the same time, we have technology that allows for cyber implants. Everybody's got a personal area network. You have contact lenses that display virtual reality in front of your eyes, or at least augmented reality. You have mobile devices, all of the rest of that. So what happens is obviously the world goes kind of crazy because all of a sudden there's things nobody's prepared to deal with, like dragons, etc. And it basically turns into a post-apocalyptic society. And in this world of Shadowrun, there arises a new type of technology and a new type of magic user called a cyber mage, somebody who blends technology with magic, somebody who creates, on top of the knowledge that the world has for technology, takes the power that comes with this new magic that has arrived in the world and builds a new discipline, a new technology, and a new form of artifact that people can interact with. So it is absolutely worth thinking about not just how people would explore the old technology, but what new technologies are enabled by the apocalypse. The apocalypse has swept clean what was before. What can now grow in these fields? What new thing can be born? And if you enjoyed that discussion of technology in post-apocalyptic societies, hit the thumbs up button. So that's essentially how I would go about building a post-apocalyptic society. I would think about the society that has emerged, the kind of governmental structures and societal structures. Then how do people rediscover the knowledge that was lost? And how do they build on top of that lost knowledge to create new knowledge and new technology? And those are my thoughts on a post-apocalyptic society. If you want to support the channel, hit the join button for these cool perks or buy my books. Links down below. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe check out my video on hidden worlds in fantasy. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds.